Nana Shastra Vicharana Kanipano Sadharma Samstapako Lokanam Hitakarino Tribhuvane Manyo Sharanya Karo Radha Krishna Padaravinda Bhajana Nandena Mataliko Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyago Shri Jiva Gopalako Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyago Shri Jiva Gopalako. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the six Goswamis, namely Sri Sanatan Goswami, Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who are very expert in scrutinizingly studying all the revealed scriptures with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles for the benefit of all human beings. Thus they're honored all over the three worlds, and they're worth taking shelter of because they're absorbed in the mood of the gopis and are engaged in the transcendental loving service of Radha and Krishna. Shri Sad Goswami Prabhu Ki. All right, I'm just going to switch this off here. Excuse me. All right. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachade Charne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha Paritanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Anantakoti Vaishnavrinda ki. Hare Krishna devotees. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So we are going on to chapter 4 of the Nectar of Devotion, which is dealing with the subject of liberation as opposed to devotional service. Yes, the chapter title is Devotional Service Surpasses All Liberation. So yesterday, of course, we were talking about the eligibility of different candidates who are on different levels and different types of persons. And towards the end, actually there was a fair amount of attention given to the subject of bhakti and mukti as challenges, as like anathas, undesirable things for devotees, and just undesirable things for anyone, really, ultimately. And there was that one verse we read, if you recall, It was a verse of Srila Rupa Goswami's in which he said that bhakti and mukti are like witches. We all know the idea of a witch. A witch is someone who casts a spell on someone else, and that person who has the spell cast on them, well, they don't do very well. It's bad. Witches and their spells are really generally understood to be very undesirable. So bhakti and mukti, they are just like, sometimes I use this term, classic types of challenges. The challenges of bhakti, material enjoyment, sense gratification, and yes, just bodily pleasures and all these types of things, mental pleasures, just pleasures of this material world, sensual pleasures. Well, that of course, it's not so difficult to understand how bhakti is undesirable. Mukti may be more difficult for many people. Even if we look at other religious traditions, they often have this idea, or I think we could say they always have this idea of liberation, salvation, being saved. We've heard that term before, haven't we? In a religious context, being saved. Well, of course, we don't want to be prisoners, but simply to be saved is not the answer. Saved from the problems of material existence. Srila Prabhupada gave a couple of examples, but, well, one example Prabhupada gave in this regard was of someone, a criminal, who gets caught and gets locked up for some years in the prison, but then he becomes an ambitious prisoner. How to improve my position in the prison. So somehow or other, whatever he does, maybe he bribes the guards, or he's just very nice to them, or something, and he gets some special facilities. So maybe he has his own room, and he has his own television, and some furniture, and people can come and visit him, and they can come right into the cell. They don't have to stay on the other side of some barrier. You get the idea. And so he thinks, oh, very good. You could say he thinks, I've been liberated from all those rotten conditions, crowded, and with all these nasty people, and just, so I've been freed from that. I'm doing well. I'm doing really nicely. But he's still a prisoner. He's still a prisoner, and that can never be good. Another example, anyway, there's a number of examples which are given of liberation, salvation, people thinking. Well, here's another example that Prabhupada gave. That is that, well, seeing we're talking about witches, back in Europe, or at least in England, that I'm aware of, to be a witch was illegal. And they would capture suspected witches, and one kind of, what would you say, not punishment even, but sort of like a investigative technique they'd use to try to ascertain, is this person a witch or not? Sometimes they would put the suspected witch on what they would call a dunking stool, which is basically a type of a chair which has rocks, some weights tied to the bottom, so that if someone is tied onto it, sitting onto it, and then thrown into some body of water, they sink. This is a dunking stool. So they would keep the suspected witch on this dunking stool under the water for some time. How long can you stay underwater? Yeah, not so long. So maybe, I don't know, couple of minutes. You can stay underwater for a couple of minutes and survive. At least for most people, you're doing well. 2 or 3 minutes. And then they'd pull out the suspected witch. And the idea was, if the person, the suspected witch, survived, it must mean the person is a witch. Because through some magic power, they didn't drown. Any normal human being would drown. And if they drowned, well, then they're given a sort of, what would you say, posthumous reprieve. Sorry. Whoops. Sorry. Seriously, they did this. They really did this. So anyway, some people who'd survive, you're stuck under the water if you've ever experienced it for too long, and it's just terribly uncomfortable. And then you're pulled out and you gasp a breath of air. Oh, relief, liberation, salvation. Oh, it's so wonderful, I can breathe. And they're just practically like rejoicing. It's just so wonderful, I can breathe. But we're all sitting here breathing, and we have been doing the whole day and every day. And who rejoices because they can breathe? Generally, nobody rejoices. You don't even notice it. It's just real automatic pilot. So, but in contrast to their position of suffering under the water, unable to breathe and just struggling to survive, to be able to take 1, 2, even 10 breaths of air, it's just like, maybe for the person, it's the best thing they've experienced in their life. Yeah. But otherwise, in general, it's just, it's nothing. People don't even notice it. They don't even notice it, let alone think that it's nice, let alone think it's just wonderful. So like this, salvation, liberation, being freed from the prison house of material existence, for someone who's been imprisoned and been struggling there in material life, it's when they get, if they get liberation, mukti, bhakti and mukti. So if they get mukti, liberation, in their minds, and if they get it, the initial experience may be, oh, wonderful, so wonderful. But by nature, we're not meant to be in this material world. So So Prabhupada gave this example also of how liberation is not really so important. It's not really very important at all. Yes, but bhakti and mukti, for someone who's entangled on the material platform, they look pretty good. We can get big enjoyment, that's great. And if we can get free from all the sufferings, that's really wonderful. So therefore they considered witches which cast spells on the minds of the conditioned souls and keep them trapped, either just trapped in the program of materialistic life through sense gratification, or trapped in the trap of liberation, which looks so good, but it's not good. In fact, of the two, it's an interesting point. Think about it. Which do you think is worse, bhakti or mukti, as a witch, bewildering people? Which do you think is worse? Anyway, you think, well, which do you think is worst? He says liberation. What do you think is worse? Material enjoyment? Do you think it's worse? So we got 1 and 1. All right. Anyway, I'll let you out of the suspense. Mukti, liberation, is considered worse. Bhakti is bad enough, don't worry. It's not like it doesn't matter. It matters, it's bad. But mukti is worse because at least if you're engaged in materialistic life of sense gratification, at least you are an individual person. You have a personality, you have relationships, you have the intelligence with which you could, and some do, try to understand God. But mukti means you lose your personality, you lose your personal existence. In this way, you lose the opportunity to develop a relationship with Krishna. At least if you're on the bodily platform trying to enjoy, at least you can, if you get the association of devotees as we discussed, at least there's the opportunity you can develop your relationship with Krishna. So it's bad, but it has certain positive sides to it, whereas liberation has very little positive going for it. Yeah. So it's like that. It's like that. Mukti, to become attached to mukti, basically eliminates to a large degree the possibility of becoming Krishna conscious. And you lose your individuality, you lose being a person, your feelings, all these things. So therefore, mukti is the worst. So now, we have mentioned, and I imagine you've heard, that Srila Prabhupada considered the defeating of impersonal philosophies, because they're different types. The defeating of impersonal philosophies, Prabhupada considered an extremely important part of his mission. And therefore, when Prabhupada came up with his second pranam mantra, Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyachadeshatarane. Prabhupada, in that second pranam mantra, which he himself composed, he specifically preached against impersonalism, at least two types, Nirvishesha and Shunyavad. Nirvishesh means basically formless. It's sort of like, you could say, normal impersonalism. That Jagan Satya, Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. Brahman is truth, this world is false. Shunyavad is different though. Shunya means zero, and Vad means knowledge. So it's zero knowledge. This is basically the type of philosophy that the Buddhists have, if they're real Buddhists. You know, it's not easy to find real Buddhists, sure. But anyway, if you happen to meet one, then you'll find out that their philosophy is Shunyavad. There is nothing. Nothing exists. Nothing exists. Even the Brahman, which the regular impersonalists consider to be the topmost thing, that spiritual reality, which we should then merge into. Even that Brahman, according to the Buddhists, and there are others. There's a group called the Kshanik Vijnanavadis. They were existing in India, or say, not just India actually, Southeast Asia. They were existing there before Buddha, and they had the same philosophy. They're Shunyavad. Nothing exists. I don't exist, you don't exist, this world doesn't exist. Brahman, like some sort of spiritual reality, doesn't exist. The philosophy, our philosophy of how nothing exists, doesn't exist. And the effort that we're making to realize, understand, realize that nothing exists, doesn't exist also. So just nothing exists. And, in Bhagavad Gita, in the beginning of the 12th chapter, Lord Krishna, he's speaking specifically more about the regular impersonal type of philosophy, not even, this more extreme Shunyavad, nihilistic philosophy. And Krishna there says that it is very difficult to make progress in that discipline for those who are embodied, because they're so used to being persons. So when you're in this even though it's illusory and it's full of faults in many ways, but when you're in this personal type of situation and you're just very tuned into it for many lifetimes, then to extract yourself into some impersonal type of idea, well, Krishna says, it's very difficult for those who are embodied. And the point is there that it's not just a matter of being embodied and being used to this sort of individualistic identity and way of life, but it's actually the nature of the soul. We're eternal persons with forms, relationships, emotions, likes and dislikes and whatever. So to attain into some state of either just being impersonal, not a person, or what to speak of being just nothing at all, is very difficult. And therefore, it's extremely rare that people are successful in it. All right, so now we've come to this chapter 4. Devotional service surpasses all liberation. And we're going to focus on this. It's the idea. The idea is that, what happens is that Srila Rupa Goswami, Srila Rupa Goswami, he presents a whole series of verses, a lot of them from Srimad Bhagavatam, some from other places. But I think we'll go through them and we'll see. I think it's quite a majority from the Bhagavatam, which are they feature different great personalities explaining how devotional service surpasses all liberation. Yeah, so that's what we'll look at here. I could just mention a little story. As I recall, it's in Leelamrita. It's definitely in one of the biographies from the Prabhupada's very early days in America, that Prabhupada, he's giving classes Monday, Wednesday, Friday evenings, or whenever, maybe every day after some time. So he's giving all these classes, and there's a regular group of young people who have gathered around him, and some of them have become initiated, and others are moving in that direction. And so they're with Prabhupada, and they're hearing from Prabhupada just all the time, practically, really on an extremely regular basis. And they noticed something. Well, they noticed many things, but one thing they noticed, which they just couldn't deal with for a while, was how Prabhupada sometimes the subject of impersonalism, not so much the Buddhist Shunyavad idea, but more the regular impersonal idea of that we're just spirit souls, we're not these bodies, we're eternal spiritual persons, and the goal of life is to merge into the great spiritual oneness which is there. So from time to time, or even pretty regularly, Srila Prabhupada would, in a class, somehow that subject would come up. And when it would come up, sometimes Prabhupada would become very spirited in pointing out the defects of these people and of this philosophy and their ideas and all these things. And Prabhupada would get worked up and become emotional. These rascals and etc., etc. Yeah, if you listen to some of the recordings of the early classes, like 66, 67, particularly those days, then you compare them to Prabhupada's presentation, like 10 years later, 75, 76, 77, the last period, you'll see his way of speaking, just of speaking, is quite different. Often, that in the very early days, Prabhupada is preaching, and you can see that he's preaching to convince someone. You should accept this. And his voice breaks and goes into a higher pitch of emotion. Yeah. So anyway, in this regard, these devotees noticed this, that they called him Swamiji in those days. He really gets excited about these impersonalist people. Who are they? There's one which I think I read about. One devotee in those really early days brings up, or maybe it's even Satswarup, but anyway, it's someone brings up that, well, I read something a little different, I think, from Ramakrishna, and I thought it was quite good, and it was something impersonal. Did you read about that? Yeah. And Prabhupada got on his case. Oh my gosh. So anyway, these devotees, it's described in one of, I think in Leelamrita, but one of the biographies, that they noticed this was going on. And so one time, maybe over prasadam or just one time, when they got together, a discussion developed. Swamiji, he really gets worked up about these impersonalist people. What do you make of it? And someone suggests that, well, he's an elderly man. And elderly people, sometimes they become like irritable, easily disturbed. So I think, as devotees speculating, I think maybe he had some argument, some big showdown with one of these impersonalists, and he just got so disturbed and angry about it that now he's got a bee under his bonnet. If you think about what that means, a bee under your bonnet, I tell you what, that's really undesirable. And it can be really painful. And now, he's just got this thing about these people, and when the subject comes up, he just takes off. Just because he's an old man and, he's kind of touchy. Little did they know that it's a really important thing in Krishna consciousness. So what I propose, what we are going to do, let's just go through, not all of the verses, because there's quite a number, but let's go through some of them. Like, how about we begin, what do you think, with the first one? That's a good place to begin. But we'll go through a number of them, and we'll see how the basic idea is that Srila Rupa Goswami, Srila Prabhupada, they've chosen these verses because they bring out how devotional service is much better than liberation in different ways, for different reasons. Different things you get from devotional service make it better than anything to do with liberation. So let's begin. Let's have a look here in the first paragraph. It's the 4th canto, chapter 20, verse 24. Maharaj Prithu is speaking to Lord Vishnu. My dear Lord, if after taking liberation, I have no chance of hearing the glories of your lordship, glories chanted by pure devotees from the core of their hearts in praise of your lotus feet, and if I have no chance for this honey of transcendental bliss, then I shall never ask for liberation or this so-called spiritual emancipation. I shall simply always pray unto your lordship that you may give me millions of tongues and millions of ears, so that I can constantly chant and hear of your transcendental glories. So obviously the point is that hearing and chanting about Krishna is just so nice. In fact, the way he puts it, I pray that you may give me millions of tongues and millions of ears. There's a verse of Rupa Goswami's actually in Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is very, very similar. Because I want to just, it's so nice, I want to just constantly chant and hear. And this liberation, forget it. Just please don't try to push it onto me. You know, even Bilvamangal Thakur, he has this one verse, what is it now? Anyway, in regards to liberation, he says, Kaivalya, which means liberation, Kaivalya narakayate. Narak means hell. As far as I'm concerned, this Kaivalya, liberation, it's no better than hell. Because, like we mentioned, you lose all your personal capacities, you lose yourself, and on top of that, you lose the possibility to become Krishna conscious. What a loss! So it's no better than hell. All right, so the point there was that there's no opportunity if you get impersonal liberation, even if you're just going through the process, you have no opportunity to hear the Lord's pastimes. Yeah. And then Prabhupada says, actually, yeah, Prabhupada says, is it? Where is it? In other words, where does he say that? In other words, unless one is already beyond liberation. Oh yeah, okay, it's the next paragraph. It's the second paragraph towards the end. In other words, unless one is already beyond liberation, one cannot relish the transcendental glories of the Lord, nor can one understand the transcendental form of the Lord. Then the next one, it's in the third paragraph. It is a glorification of Maharaj Bharat. You know, in his earlier days, yeah, or even practically almost to the end, he was a really good devotee. Of course, we all know he got into some difficulty after that. But this is talking about when he was very nicely situated as a devotee. Shukadev Goswami is glorifying Bharat Maharaj. The great soul King Bharat was so much attached to the service of the lotus feet of Krishna that he very easily gave up his lordship over the earthly planet and his affection for his children, society, friends, royal opulence, and beautiful wife. And so on. So, well, that's actually to do with bhakti, isn't it? But Prabhupada then goes on, still in that same paragraph, Shukadev Goswami praises this behavior of King Bharat very highly. He says, any person whose heart is attracted by the transcendental qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Madhusudana, does not care even for that liberation which is aspired to by many great sages. What to speak of material opulences? So there's a whole lot of verses, and we are going to read some of them and see what points come out. Let's see, what's the next one that we are going to look at? I think what we'll do now, it's the next paragraph. Look at that. Look at that. 6th canto, 11th chapter, verse 25. If you're in our PDF, it's the second full paragraph on page 31. Aha, and this is Vritrasura, very interesting person, Vritrasura. And let me just, before I read the actual verse, let me just read a little explanation. Well, let me just tell you who is Vritrasura in case you're not really familiar with the story. Vritrasura in his previous life was King Chitraketu. And he's described in some detail, actually, over a number of chapters in the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. King Chitraketu was a great devotee, very great devotee, so great that the Supreme Personality of Godhead appeared in front of him and spoke to him. And they had a whole conversation. So that means Chitraketu was, I think, a greater devotee than any of us. Any of you had Krishna appear in front of you and speak to you? I haven't. Some dreams sometimes. But that's what happened to Chitraketu. The Lord personally appeared in front of him and spoke with him, and there was a whole interaction. Unfortunately, as time went on, again, it's one of our long stories. We have many long stories in Krishna consciousness. He got cursed to become a demon. Actually, he was on the level of prema, Krishna prema. So therefore, and this point is analyzed or just brought out by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in Madhurya Kadambini. Therefore, when he had to take the body of a demon, which happened, and he was the body at least was the body of a monstrous, shocking demon, extreme demon, but he remained fully Krishna conscious because he was on the level of Krishna prema. So even some sort of happening like that couldn't affect his consciousness. But there he was, though. He was forced to live in the body of a demon, being treated by others as a demon. Means, when he would come along the road, people would run away. I don't know if people run away from you when you walk along the road, but you can imagine it wouldn't be very nice. Yeah, sure, that really wouldn't be nice at all. So eventually, and again, it's all part of a really long story, actually. He was killed in battle by Lord Indra. Yeah. But just before he was killed, in his mood of Krishna prema, he recited prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead because he knew, I'm going to die right now. It's just coming right now. So he just sort of poured out his heart to the Supreme Lord. And there are 4 verses quoted there at the end of the 11th chapter of the 6th canto. And one of them is quoted here. And Srila Jiva Goswami in Priti Sandarbha makes this statement. Listen to this. Thinking the good fortune of directly seeing the Supreme Lord is an impossible attainment for him, Vritrasura, his eyes filled with tears, speaks these prayers in Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th canto, 11th chapter. Because the description of Vritrasura's death is filled with these extraordinary prayers of pure spiritual love, prema, the description is included in Srimad Bhagavatam and other Puranas also. It's something special. It's something special. So anyway, here's the particular verse in this regard, in regard to liberation. O my Lord, source of all opportunities, I do not desire to enjoy in Dhruvaloka, the heavenly planets, or the planet where Lord Brahma resides, nor do I want to be the supreme ruler of all the earthly planets or the lower planetary systems. I do not desire to be master of the powers of mystic yoga, nor do I want liberation if I have to give up your lotus feet. Okay. Yes, all right. So now, let's see, where shall we go from here? We're going to skip around a little bit. We're going to go down on the same page. If you've got the PDF, is it? No, it's not. It's the following page, actually. It would be the bottom of page 32, which is the following page. The first words are, in the 9th canto of the Bhagavatam, 4th chapter, verse 67. The Lord of Vaikuntha replies to Devasa Muni thus, my pure devotees are always satisfied, being engaged in devotional service, and therefore they do not aspire even after the 5 liberated stages, which are 1, to be one with me, 2, to achieve residence on my planet, 3, to have my opulences, 4, to possess bodily features similar to mine, and 5, to gain personal association with me. So when they're not interested even in these liberated positions, you can know how little they care for material opulences or material liberation. Yeah. And so the point is, it's a slightly different perspective, just very slightly. The point is that through devotional service, the devotees become disinterested in these things. They just lose interest. Previously we read how Maharaj Prithu was saying, wasn't it? That, if I get liberation and lose the possibility to hear and chant about Krishna, I don't want liberation. This verse is saying that if you render devotional service, you just lose interest in those things. They no longer become attractive to you. All right, so what next? Let's see. Well, for those of you who are doing the Bhakti Shastri, you should note that about the 5 stages of liberation. Yeah, you should note that the pure devotees reject these things. So, we read earlier, some days ago, well, here's an interesting little point. It's easier for an ordinary karmi to take to Krishna consciousness than a confirmed Mayavadi. How many impersonalists, like, more serious impersonalists, have we had join us? Not so many. I think sitting here in this room, I think we've got, well, if we counted ourselves, we've got that number of people who used to be interested in material enjoyment more. So it's easier for a materialist to become a devotee than an impersonalist. And Krishna may easily give liberation or material enjoyment to a devotee. We read that. But more easily than he'll give devotional service, if you remember. We read that. Okay, anyway, let's just go through some more of the verses. We're going to go back up. We're going to go back up. We are now on, it's the paragraph immediately after the Vritrasura verse that we just read a few minutes ago. It's the 5th paragraph in the whole chapter, the 5th paragraph, and it begins, "This statement is confirmed by Lord Shiva in Srimad Bhagavatam, where he addresses Sati thus, 'My dear Sati, persons who are devoted to Narayan, Krishna, are not afraid of anything. If they're elevated to the higher planetary systems, or if they get liberation from material contamination, or if they're pushed down to the hellish condition of life, or in fact, in any situation, whatever, they're not afraid of anything. Simply because they've taken shelter of the lotus feet of Narayan or Krishna, for them any position in the material world is as good as another.'" So again, liberation is mentioned along with material enjoyment, which is also the case in some of the other verses. And the point here is that the devotee, through Krishna consciousness, is not afraid, has nothing to fear of any sort, that in the heavenly planets this might happen, or, I might become attracted to material enjoyment. So if Krishna asks me to go to the heavenly planets, I will decline, which is not a very good idea. I will say, couldn't someone else go? Maybe, I don't know who could go. Maybe Raghunath Bhatta Prabhu could go. He's very austere. Or if Krishna wants the devotee to go to the hellish planets, Krishna, may I decline? I hear it's a hell of a place. And, I don't want to be inconvenienced that much. So would it be all right? Someone else went there. But the point here, Lord Shiva's telling Parvati, that a devotee is not concerned. If Krishna wants me to go here or there or anywhere, or stay here, or take birth again, or go back to Goloka Vrindavan, or even if I'm in Goloka Vrindavan already, and one day Krishna says, I have a special mission for you in somewhere in the material world, anywhere, wherever it may be. But that devotee, even having already arrived in Goloka Vrindavan, if Krishna wants it, the devotee will accept. Yes, whatever Krishna wants, and no fear. What if this happens? Or what if I go there? Oh, I don't know. So that's another point. Then the next paragraph, there's a similar statement by Indra, the king of heaven, in Srimad Bhagavatam 6:18-74. he's addressing deity. My dear mother, persons who have given up all kinds of desire and are simply engaged in devotional service to the Lord know what is actually their self-interest. Such persons are actually serving their self-interests and are considered first-class experts in the matter of advancing to the perfectional stage of life. So the point there is that the devotees know their self-interest, know what will actually help them, know what they want, know what they need in life. And so they've given up all kinds of desire, including material desire and desire for liberation. Then, oh, this is a nice one. In the 7th canto, next paragraph, 7.6.25, Maharaj Prahlad says, my dear friends, born into atheistic families, if you can please the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, then there is nothing more rare in this world. In other words, if the Supreme Lord Krishna is pleased with you, then any desire you may have within the core of your heart can be fulfilled without any doubt. As such, what is the use of elevating yourself by the results of fruitive activities, which are automatically achieved in all events by the modes of material nature? And what is the use for you of spiritual emancipation or liberation from material bondage? If you're always engaged in chanting the glories of the Supreme Lord and always relishing the nectar of the lotus feet of the Lord, then there is no necessity for any of these. So it's a different point, isn't it? It's another point. I'm suggesting you should note these different points. Why devotional service is better. I mean, particularly than liberation, as that's the title of the chapter, but also better than material enjoyment. So here it's better because if you do devotional service nicely and you please Krishna, then he'll give you whatever, anything you can think of. Yeah, the benefits are so much greater. So, render devotional service. Don't try to get material enjoyment, and don't bother with liberation. Then, now, the next verse actually covers 2 paragraphs. We're over on page, 32. And there's a discussion here. Let's see, what is it now? Oh, it's Indra offering prayers to Lord Nrsingadev, 7.8.42. And the point he makes, well, basically the point he makes, I'll read it a bit. I'll read some of it. The point he makes is that actually everything is meant for the Lord. Therefore, we shouldn't take anything for ourselves. But if we offer everything to the Lord, in the end, we enjoy it by His grace, and we get the best enjoyment that way from getting, being able to share things which we have offered to Him. So Lord Indra says, O Supreme One, these demons talk of our share of participation in the performances of ritualistic sacrifices. But simply by your appearance as Lord Nrsingadev, you've saved us from terrible fears. Actually, our shares in the sacrificial performances are due, are meant for you only, because you're the supreme enjoyer of all sacrifices. So like this, he speaks that, the demons say, our share, it belongs to us. And we also, the demigods, we do sacrifices. But we understand, or we should understand, we try to understand, that it's all yours anyway. So what sort of sacrifice is it for us? Because it doesn't belong to us. How can it be a real sacrifice for us? Yeah, so then he goes on. How does he go on? Let's see. Uh, 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 uh. Anyway, he just goes on explaining the same sort of point, how the Lord has been merciful to them by killing Hiranyakashipu, and how the devotees don't care for these things, because actually we are not enjoyers of the fruits of sacrifice. And Prabhupada then gives an explanation, like a little purport to that, in the following paragraph. The purport of this statement by Indra is that, beginning from Brahma down to the insignificant ant, no living entities are meant for enjoying the material opulences. They're simply meant for offering everything to the Supreme Proprietor, the personality of Godhead. By doing so, they automatically enjoy the benefit. And then Prabhupada gives the example of eating food. If the food is offered to the body, then all the different parts of the body benefit. Okay, let's see. Let's have a look. Just one more and then we'll finish. Where are we? Shri Radha Radhanath, Shri Giri Govardhan, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. So just one more. Just stick with us. So we go on to the next paragraph, of course. So a similar verse is found in 8th Canto, chapter 3, verse 20. Gajendra, my dear Lord, I have no experience of the transcendental bliss derived from your devotional service. So therefore I've asked from you some favor. But I know that persons who are pure devotees and have, by serving the lotus feet of great souls, become freed from all material desires, are always merged in the ocean of transcendental bliss. And as such, they're always satisfied, simply by glorifying your auspicious characteristics. For them, there's nothing else to aspire to or pray for. Yeah. So in other words, he's a devotee, but he's saying, because I'm inexperienced, we also may lack experience of what can really be there for a devotee in devotional service. And therefore, lacking experience, we may even become attracted to material life. Or if not that, we may think that, yes, I should ask the Lord to give me some sort of benefit, like Gajendra prayed for liberation, salvation. Free me from this crocodile, please. Yeah. But the devotees, the great devotees are always satisfied by glorifying Krishna, and therefore they've got no interest in aspiring for anything else or praying for anything else. So, okay, Hare Krishna. Tomorrow we'll go over a couple more of these. I think you get the basic idea, but we'll go over a couple more, and then we'll go on to chapter 5 tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna.